Okay, I am here with my good friend Mo. Mo, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Mohamed Massaquoi, live here in Atlanta. I do speaking and coaching really around the topic of transformation, reinvention, change, all those fun topics.
Nice. And how long have you been doing that?
Started back in 2018. Got into this world unexpectedly, had a crazy ATV accident where I lost my left hand. And people started to reach out and say, hey, we're going through a lot of change. Can you talk about mindset, resilience, just how you transform, become the next version of yourself? Haven't looked back.
Nice. Yep. And I've gotten to hear you speak several times. It's incredibly inspiring. You gave the keynote at the 48 and 48 event last year, which was amazing. So I appreciate you doing that.
It was just a fun excuse to hang out together.
There you go. All right, cool. So, the way this came up is the last time we chatted, I think it was at in Virginia Highlands coffee shop. And we were just riffing on leadership. A lot of what you talk about from a transformation perspective is leadership. A lot of what I talk about from a purpose perspective is leadership. And it was just, we had to stop because we got done with our hour or so. And I was like, man, I want to do more of that. So I thought, why don't we do that? Why don't we just record it? So that's what we're doing.
I love it. It just be a continuation of all the conversations we've had already. So
that's right. That's right. So I guess I want to start with this. You get a chance to speak to lots of organizations, lots of teams, big, small, big stages, small stages. I know you've done some consulting. When you think about leadership, and I guess when you think about the most difficult aspects of leadership, obviously going through transformations, one of those things, but like, what are some of the things that you see are most commonly difficulties for leaders?
I think it's like following this rigid playbook of whatever they whiteboarded out in their offsite, and they thought that this was going to last, a year, 3 years, 5 years, and it was supposed to go according to plan, and it never does. And so that lacks of flexibility, I think, is key. Of why a lot of people don't thrive through it. I think the other thing is we expect change to happen, but we don't always control how volatile it is. And so people haven't really built up that muscle memory to actually absorb the shock, or they don't have the resources to absorb the shock because they haven't planned accordingly, or they didn't think that this would ever affect them in that capacity. The other thing is that people get so siloed in their approach, just the leadership team or just their internal team or just their core group, and they don't realize that a lot of people are going through the same thing that they're going through. And so maybe expanding their bubble of influence a little bit more to be able to talk to other people that may be going through similar things and realize that everybody has a little piece of the puzzle, and if you put them together, you get the answer, but not if you just keep going back to the same sources. And then there's a million other things, but I think those are some of the top ones.
I love it. I want to go back to the first thing you talked about, which sounded like flexibility, being able to absorb the shock. One of the things we spoke about before, because you come from the football world, and it's interesting. So the corollary I would give is if a coach of an NFL team knows that he has 1 year or 2 years, and he has to show great success or he's out, versus one that is given the time to do the right things and build for the long term. I find the same thing of publicly owned companies. Leaders have to provide quarterly results versus privately owned companies. Typically, you can do the right thing and build over time. And so, is it harder, do you think, for leaders who are, I'll just say, less secure in their place, one bad mistake and they're out, if they're not given that long-term view? Is it harder for them to be flexible and adapt?
I mean, I think it's a combination. I think human nature, you understand some people are just more selfish intrinsically of how they approach the world, coming from a team environment that's somewhat still confusing. And so some people may say, I know I'm only going to be here this 2 years. Let me get as much money as possible, as much status as possible, not realizing that actually sabotages what they want long term. Because if you're known as the individual that has helped prop this up, you're actually going to be more valuable and to collect more resources. At the end of that is what motivates you and what inspires you. But then oftentimes, I don't know if people actually know what they want. you'll have your mission, you have your values, you'll have your goals, but then the thing that they actually want is just, make a lot of money. And those two things are at odds because the timing of that and the win of that is it in general it impacts the way people approach things. And so if you look over the long tail, the people that do it right, whether it's your Buffetts of the world or the coaches or the athletic programs that have built long sustainable things that are successful over a long horizon, they have a great foundation. And then other things you may see a spike and then it drops, and it's really hard to build after you gutted the foundation of all the good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, you've seen. Let's talk for a minute about the corollaries between leadership in athletics versus leadership in business, because you have a unique perspective, having been at the highest levels of both. Like, I'm curious, like, what can either side learn from each other? And I know in the past we've talked, like, even I've been able to draw experiences from like the coaches that I've had when I was a tennis player in college to seeing and working with leaders in business. And like, there's traits I think that go across those two areas.
Something I recently learned is that football was used to teach strategy during wars. It was like they would simulate, how people work together or strategy and everything. And so it's not that far off from how people approach business. Like, people always use these sports references. We got to block and tackle, skate to where the puck is, work in a team, win the day, whatever the jargon is of the moment. And so what I've learned is that almost for every sports situation, it maps on perfectly business. The draft is no different than talent acquisition. Performing under pressure is no different than like the 2-minute drill. Working in teams across silos is no different than offense, defense, special teams, and all the other parts. And so once you start to realize that, it's just really, what language are you using? Whether we use, sports partnerships or we use partnerships in business, it's like kind of the same thing. You may get to it a little bit differently. And so I've actually leaned in more and have a very deep understanding and expertise rooted in sports. But now if I can figure out which language transfers over so that it's an easy reference point to someone else, it's helpful. But then it's, you look at how valuable sports properties are right now that, whether it's hedge fund people or true business people, they're trying to invest in these assets because these assets are highly valuable. They're highly marketable. They're highly attractive, and they're going to be that way for a long time. In essence, that's how you kind of want to build your business, to where you're the biggest game in town and people are attracted to you, and you have like this fandom around why you're doing things. So these two worlds, I think we'll see start to just collide even more as we continue to move forward.
It's so interesting. Yeah, you're right. There's so many analogies used in business from sports. I've even used, I think we talked about this, but as my marketing agencies were growing, I found it helpful to use the analogy of sort of like, you've got the head coach of the team, but then you've got the wide receiver coach, and then you've even got the quarterback. And so like during the play, the quarterback is very much the leader, but that quarterback is not necessarily the person who's going to train the wide receivers on how to be the best version of themselves. And so when we think about that, like in the agency world, it's like we're working on a project with a client, the project manager or account manager, whoever, they're leading the team and you're following their direction. But that doesn't mean they're the best in class at development. It just means you need a leader in that moment. And so I've even used that, and I've never played football, but like I can see how that goes in that direction. I'm curious how it goes the other way. Like, as you look back at the coaches you've had that you liked the most, or you felt got the most out of you, or maybe flip that, ones that you didn't feel like did a great job. Are there things they could have learned maybe from the business community?
It's interesting because I think what's different is in the business community, people become, there's a thing that you do, like someone may sell clothing, but then you have to market that clothing, and you may not necessarily need to know how to like sell or stitch the stuff, but you know how to market. And I think in the sports world, there is a lot of understanding of the job to be done. And I think in business, there's not always an understanding of like, the job to be done in the industry to be done. And with that, you get a different level of functional expert that doesn't always know like how their job connects to other people. I would almost say sports translates better to business than business translates to sport, unless you're dealing with, ticket sales and the construction of stadiums and like some of that other like businessy things. But like the actual product itself, I think it's sport to business. You learn a little bit more. Now that changes in the world of NIL and having to manage talent and transferring and all that other stuff at the collegiate level. But at the professional level, you got contracts. Or I take that back. I think something could be learned in the sense that when you see people get like these huge deals and you may not get a championship out of that deal, but you feel obligated to sign that player to a high contract for whatever reason. I think a lot of those deals are bad, or you may trade a lot of your assets to get a player, and you realize that those things rarely work out. And so how you maybe evaluate assets the way you evaluate talent can be learned from sports. Is one player really worth 3 first-round picks? If they don't bring you a title, then no. Or, if I'm over the luxury cap in a certain area, am I going to make enough of that back? Or does it make sense to just kind of blow up the team and start over? So I kind of take that back. I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth right now, but maybe in that regard of how you manage assets and talent from business to sport.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And that's part of the whole reason I wanted to just chat is like, let's just hash stuff out and see where we get. One of the things that I think about, it's interesting. It seems to me there have been great sports teams that, at least for a short period, that had a great deal of dysfunction, but somehow the talent got them through. Typically, I think you'd want to have a team that was coalescing really well, but like, again, like we've talked, I've been a huge sort of student of Jordan and what he built with the Bulls and everything. And as you watch The Last Dance, for instance, there was a lot of dysfunction. I mean, a great deal, but in the business world, it's really hard to be successful. You can have like some great salesperson or someone, but if they're just toxic, it almost never works. So I guess I'm asking you, like, how much is there a difference in the need for teams to be working really well together? Is it the same across business and athletics, or do you think you can get away with it a bit more in athletics because talent in many cases can, overcome?
Well, we got to understand what kind of talent. If you're like rare air talent, your Jordans, your LeBrons, your Brady's, your, like that, just rare air.
Mm-hmm.
They themselves can lift a team, lift a franchise, lift a city, lift a community, like by themselves, like just because they're that talented. Like it's almost like Steve Jobs.
I was just going to say the same thing. When you said that, I thought, man, you're right. Steve Jobs is the example.
Yes. The thing that people don't realize is that there's probably less than 100 of those people walking the earth. And so most people that are talented confuse that they are on that level, and they're not, and they don't have the ability to like transcend the thing. And so that's where it becomes toxic. But even in that, though, there's a method to the madness of they're not doing it just for personal. Like they're doing it really to win. And they're trying to, like Kobe's trying to win a championship. He's trying to get everybody to raise their level of play so that we all win this championship for the organization. In business, it's not always like that. It's sometimes that this person is doing it once again for like their own personal reasons to get the most money, or they're not trying to change a sector. And I think that's when it becomes more of a problem. And you can see the difference of, is this toxicity leading to group success, or is this toxicity just because we're dealing with a narcissist, self-indulged leader that only cares about themselves? And you can kind of see that difference. But most people don't have that situation because they're not, one of the, 100 people on the earth that can have that type of talent.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it really is the same, you think, in business and in athletics. Just once in a while, there can be somebody who's just so great and they can will things forward and the dysfunction just sort of works together. But in most cases, you want people on the same page, whether it's a sports team or a business team.
I mean, you look at most organizations, or let's use sports for example. The last, I don't know, 20 years, it's been LeBron, it's been Steph Curry, it's been Mahomes, it's been Brady, it's been, and so we kind of know within striking distance who's going to
Mm.
be in the running for it. That's not going to change because that elite talent is the one that's going to power it. You look in business, there's certain companies that have been at the top when these leaders have been, in positions of control. Most people don't have that. And so they have to run a much more clean, non-toxic environments. And oftentimes those people aren't necessarily toxic teammates. They just are pushing you maybe to a level that is beyond your comfort. And that is the toxicity.
Yeah.
That may be a little different than Steve Jobs. I don't necessarily know his leadership style, but when you're in those situations where Brady's like, we're not trying to have fun. We're trying to
Yeah.
win,
Yeah.
that is like for all of us to kind of get on board.
Yep. Yep. And I think, to your point earlier, the Kobe's, the Brady's, they had that singular goal. We're going to win championships. That's what we're here to do. And knowing that, I don't know if they were driven, to be the greatest of all time, but knowing that winning championships is the way to get there. I do feel like many businesses and when I deal with teams, not having that goal, not having that unifying vision of what they're trying to achieve, it is a hindrance. I wonder, as you talk mostly with teams about transformation, how often, like, are you surprised that there's more or less of a clear vision for most of these teams? Like, do you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, most of them don't really have a North Star that they're all working toward, or do they? Like, what are you seeing?
That's huge. Where, I mean, I don't even know if you can accurately create a strategy if you don't know where you're going. And the strategy is oftentimes of a revenue target or a growth target, but it's not a thing. Like we don't say we want to win the Super Bowl by 100 points or 1 point, or we're trying to grow and win all the things unless you're fortunate to be an owner, like Magic Johnson. But there is a singular target that the equipment staff knows, the tax people know, the front office know, the kicker knows, the nutritionist knows, your barber in that city knows. Like everybody knows what the team is trying to do, and everybody can kind of orient their activities in a way that help push it. The fans even showing up for the game if they have a division rival in town and being extra loud that game. They know that they're doing their part to reach the goal. But you may have tech and legal and marketing and some other function, and they always say, like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how it impacts my job. And so there's no real team bonding. Those, like, we're all going towards the same thing together. And that can be confusing me because now I don't know how Jeff helps me. I don't know why I'm incentivized to work with Jeff. I don't know if me and Jeff are actually on the same team, even though we're in the same organization. And that kind of confuses things a lot of times, in my experience of coming across organizations. That's like a whole
Yep.
process in itself that we never get to the end of a lot of times with some organizations because they literally don't know where they're trying to go.
This is why I've been such a fan of The Great Game of Business. I think we've talked about it before, but basically a guy named Jack Stack created it, I don't know, in the 70s. I mean, he created it a long time ago, but basically his premise was like, if you go into any sports team, any professional team, especially, you can ask everyone on that team, what is our goal this year? Sometimes it's to make the playoffs. Sometimes it's to win the championship, win the conference. You can ask them what the score is in the game they're playing right then. You can ask them what their record is in the conference. You can ask them what their role is to help the team win. And then you all win together. You get the chip together or you lose together. And his point was, you walk into almost every business and nobody can answer that question. Certainly not if you talk to, say, the receptionist and you're like, hey, how's the company doing right now? Oh my gosh, they would have no idea, right? Because those things haven't been defined. You're not moving all in the same direction. And I've always, that was something, when I graduated from college and started my first business, having been on a competitive team in college, and then being a part of a small startup, we felt that. It was like just natural. We're 5 people, we're 10 people, we're 15, and it feels that way. And then eventually we got to a point where we were 40, 50, 60 people, and it was gone. And I was sort of baffled. I'm like, why aren't people excited about our growth? Why aren't they excited that we just won this thing? And I'm realizing, well, articulated to them why this is important. I have not shown them that we're all working towards something, whereas when you're small in business, it's easier. When you're on a sports team, it's easy because it's right there. But I feel like most companies just completely miss that.
Yeah. And it's, in context, people may look at, let's say, football. There's 53 people on a roster that are playing. I'd imagine 300 to 400 people that maybe work in staff, and so it's not your thousands of persons organization, but it's very clean in terms of knowing the function of everybody's role and what they need to do to succeed, and everybody can figure out, like, I'm not playing. The bus driver isn't playing. But I know if I get this team to the bus on time and we win the game, I kind of feel some pride in that. You can almost draw a line to how your job impacts everybody else's. Now that gets way more complicated, and it takes a lot more strategy and structure to be able to orient that. But if an organization of any size can be able to tell people, this is how your job helps us move forward, and this are the other parts that help your job move forward, it helps people just kind of have more of that team mindset versus I'm just playing receiver and I don't really care about what the left tackle's doing. I better, because if we give up a sack or if I drop a pass, I know I'm impacting everybody else. And so you got to kind of know how you fit into all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Agreed. I think that's one of the big things I see is that component is missing in business where I see it in teams. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I'd love your perspective on, like, are you reading books on leadership? Are you you mentioned building your network and building your bubble of influence for leaders and that being important for them. It seems to me if you're in athletics, there are so many examples of things you can study of people before you that were great. A little bit harder in business. Certainly if you're the CEO, there's lots of books, plenty of things, but like, do you find value in like typical leadership books? Are you reading autobiographies? What are you doing to sort of continue to learn?
I'll read autobiographies of a lot of different people. And it's more so, how did they think about approaching this crossroads? I will read information not about leadership, just in general, about culture, about regions, about almost like anthropology type things where you're learning how different people approach things. And then I'm talking to people just to figure out almost this cross section of what are you experiencing? It could be the entry level person. It could be the, senior leader across all industries. And you start to get more of of an understanding of just like the totality of what people see. It could be, I'm leading as I'm losing a loved one. It could be, I'm leading as we're laying people off. It could be, I'm entering into the workforce and I don't have any mentorship. I'm the first person in my family to graduate. And so the more you can have an understanding of these perspectives, it becomes super helpful. Or even something I thought about during COVID, where you may have a senior leader that they have a lot of resources and they have childcare. And so remote work or lack thereof, or coming back to the office doesn't bother them. And then you may have somebody on the other side of that. It's like, my kid's out of school and they're in elementary school and it's not even feasible. Those two worlds don't even know they exist. And the problem isn't actually remote work at all. It's like some other thing that hasn't been accounted for. And so the more you can understand like what's happening on the perimeter, it becomes a little more helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found that the best leaders I know are they're usually readers, but they're definitely students, I guess you would say, of it. Leadership's one of those interesting things where you sort of continue elevating until you get there. And then there's not really a tight playbook. You sort of have to figure it out. And, like time management, for instance, and when you're the top, you decide what you do every day. This is the advice I really hammer into, like, new entrepreneurs, people who've been in a career and they say, okay, I'm going to jump out and I'm going to start this consultancy or something. And my main advice to them is, like, how you spend your time is everything. You came from a world where you were told what to do every day. You came in and you had things coming at you, but you have to prioritize and focus on that. And I agree with you. Like, I find reading about, again, it doesn't have to be leaders necessarily, but reading about people who've been successful, usually it's how they focus. It seems to be what is one of the big differentiators for them?
Yeah, everything is I think situational awareness is important. How you lead a football team may be different than, how you lead a bakery. How you lead a tech company may be different than how you lead, I don't know, a school. And so leadership, there is no one style of leadership that's better or worse than the other. It's about knowing your people. It's about knowing what season are you in. Is it sunshine and rainbows and you could be, different, or you wartime and, you're fighting for your life. And so it depends. That's probably one of the biggest thing I learned when I was getting my org psych degree. It's like everything depends, that there is no black and white anywhere. And the more you can understand that, you're open to how you may approach a situation to get the best results.
So right. So right. So let's talk for just a second about leadership style. Because we've all seen the coach at halftime giving the roaring speech in the movie and everything, and it moves everybody. But how important do you think any leader, say in business, can have their own style? They just have to be authentic to it, or do you think certain styles do work better? What are your thoughts?
It's hard because it depends. If you walk into a situation and that's not your talent, you got to lead in the way that's best for the talent. Now, if you're, I don't know, a hard-nosed football coach, you may want to bring in hard-nosed players because they're more receptive to it. If you got a whole bunch of like players that don't want to be yelled at, that style's not going to work. And you see it both ways and it'd be successful. Andy Reid's maybe a little more laid back. He's not, fiery. And then you may have your Bill Belichick that's a little more, militant in the way your coach thing. Is one better or worse than the other? I don't know. But it's more of who your talent is and how you lead. And you have to be able to shift that style a little bit, unless you just are one of the lucky few that have the exact talent that's going to resonate with your style in the moment that you're in. And then it changes, some of the things that people did when I played, many moons ago, this generation may not be as receptive to it. And so you even have to alter how you approach people depending on the time, the region, the geography, the culture, all of that.
Yeah. I remember a time, my senior year of college, you're cheering on your teammates. I guess it's a little bit different because tennis is more individual. So everyone's playing singles. And while you're on the sideline watching, you're like, let's go, come on, and certainly there's a lot of adrenaline and you're cheering hard. And I remember our coach, we had this soft-spoken German guy. He was our number 2 player and he was in a big match. And we were up there and he'd hit a good shot. Come on, let's go. And our coach came over and he basically was like, guys, you're sort of startling him. You need to be a little pull it back a little bit. Not everybody's the same. This other guy you can do that with, and it was the first time I was like, wow, that's right. I get that. I could see that because we thought we were doing the right thing, but he had the situational awareness, I guess, to know this guy needs to be treated a little bit differently. And he comes from a place where, come on, just kind of, whoa, what are you doing? So I thought that was an interesting moment for me. And I sort of always have had that in my head.
Yeah, I think our old trainer in Cleveland, he used to talk about a guy that I won't get the details of who the player was, but this guy needed to be slapped before the game. And could you imagine you're going to slap, one of your teammates right now in the work that you're doing?
Amazing. No.
Or slap him. And this guy needed to get mad and fired up before the game. That's what he needed. And then there's other people that, they want to listen to gospel music. They don't want all that ha-ha. And then there's people that went and partied the night before. And that's what they needed. And it's you have to figure out as a leader, how do I take the collection of all these people with different backgrounds and different approaches and like cook it together in a way that it makes sense, and it presents a good meal at the end, which is incredibly difficult. And it changes depending on how I slept, what's going on with my family, what's going on with this individual's, whatever. And you never solve it. It's a continuous game of figuring it out.
That's got to be, on a team as big as a football team, that's got to be tough. Really knowing how to get each guy in the right headspace to go out there and be their best.
Yes and no. But the thing that at the beginning of the year, we have certain, once again, goals that we know, regardless of how I'm feeling, I have to put myself in a position to reach these goals. We have certain values. And so even if I'm more laid back and competition is one of our values, I'm gonna have to pick it up, when we step out on this field, or if teamwork or communication is one of our values. Even if I'm soft spoken, I've agreed to these values that we've set. And so it's these two sides kind of meeting in the thing that is going to be like the anchor for everyone. And so the coach knows these are the values that I think are going to give us the greatest chance to succeed. The players know I've agreed to these things. And so while I may have different characteristics, I have to figure out how to pull myself back here. And the coach's job is to help you get centered in a way that everybody just makes it work at the end of the day.
I always felt like Phil Jackson must have been one of the best at this, what we're talking about. Like, when he was able to get Rodman in and then allow Rodman to be Rodman at times, like I remember the classic, like Rodman went to Vegas between a couple games or some crazy thing. And Phil was like, he'll be back. It'll be fine. This guy needs this, and at the same time, he could be hard on another guy. And just that, I don't know, that philosophy of treating everybody the right way or the right way for them to get the best out of them. I guess in business, it feels like it's harder for some leaders to grasp that, especially older leaders who, like, to your point, they grew up in a time when it's like, sit down and do your work. Let's go. Like, you're getting paid, get going, but that doesn't always bring the best out in people.
Leadership is hands-on. And I think that's what you see in coaching. That's another big difference where coaches are just as much in the game plan as they are in the details of the player and how they measure it and how they track it, where a leader may not really be invested in the employees as much as they are looking at Excel or spreadsheets and all that other good stuff. And that is the thing that helps power all that stuff forward, where you can win with a bad game plan if everybody's hitting on all cylinders. You can win running the wrong play if everybody's doing what they need to do. But you can't win if there's dysfunction within the team in terms of how they execute together, because everybody's going to be on a different page. And the margin of error is so slim that you need everybody rallying and you're figuring out this person is going to show up differently than this person. And that's okay, because they'll execute what I need them to execute.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Last thing I'll talk about is, again, you focus a lot on helping leaders or teams through transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, what are for anyone listening, certainly they should reach out to you and have you come in and consult or give a talk to their team, inspire their team, do your workshops. But what are some of the things, like the first couple of things you always want to instill in teams that are going through transformation?
That's going to be all right. Just to start there, if we all look back, we've all been through many transformations, and we will go through many more transformations. And we forget that, we just went through COVID and people were on the other side of it. Even if you've suffered, you got on the other side of it. People went through the financial crisis. People older than that went through the .com boom. People older than that went through something else. And so there's always these big shifts that you figure out a way to get through. The other part now, it's like this open canvas to create. Like when the things are chaotic, you don't get blamed for taking chances and taking risks, because it's what's expected. No one has a playbook for how we get through any of this. And so we're all figuring it out and iterating. And this gives you a little bit more leeway to create and do things. But once again, we can't do it alone. And so you need all hands on deck. You need creative minds coming. This is when you maybe relinquish a little bit control as a leader, give a little more autonomy so people have some type of insight on they can take chances and they can do things that hopefully will benefit the organization, talk to other people, figure out what's happening around them. And I think that collection of things allows people to start creating momentum and iterating to what happens next. But this whole whiteboard, this is where we want to be in 2-3 years, we don't know. We could discover something way better than that as we continue to work together. And it's a better version of what we were anyway.
Yeah. And talk about a time of change. I mean, with what's going on in the world and our economy, and then you got AI on top of it. I can't imagine again, yes, COVID was a huge thing, but I can't imagine people needing that message of how to get through transformation more than now, because there's so much coming at people.
It's crazy. It's in every way, shape, or form. Companies are being bought. Companies are running out of money. People are consolidating. Industries are transforming. Technology is being obsolete. Talent is scared. Leaders are scared. And so it's just this conversion of a million things happening at one time. And just to organize that in a way that gives people, a way to say, we're going to be all right through this, and actually take ownership to make progress is pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, listen, I love the work that you're doing. Again, I've been fortunate. I hope other people will go and find a way. Do you have on, I don't know if it'd be on Vessel or on your personal site or something, places that you're speaking? How would people find out?
It's crazy. Most of my stuff's corporate, so it's not
Open to the public.
Yeah, it's not open. But we'll be happy to spend time with them, talk to them, or help them along their way if possible.
All right. Well, so in the show notes, I'll put links to the places they can find you. But and then, of course, someday soon you'll have a book. Hopefully, I keep talking to you about it.
Yeah. So book is being written right now.
Good.
Podcast is in progress right now, and so podcast will come before book, and then book will come hopefully shortly after that.
Good man. Good man. Well, thanks again. Again, I said we could get coffee, but why not just record it and catch up this way? So I appreciate it.
We'll probably end up getting coffee anyway. So
yeah, we will, man. All right. Well, good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
All right. Anytime.